It's always good to have background information on the platform and the environment that you are developing for. We are going to be using JavaScript in this course. JavaScript is typically used in a web page which is running inside of a browser. So it would be helpful to know things about not only the browser but the web in general, such as the life cycle of a web page. And that's what we will talk about in this lesson. Now, I want to say that this lesson isn't going to really be applicable to anything else within this course. But if you continue down the JavaScript path, then the things that we talk about today become relevant, because then you start have to worrying about data transfer and performance and all of that wonderful stuff. But if you're not going to go down the JavaScript path, it's good to know this information. So if you don't know how the web works in general, then feel free to watch this because it's good information and it's something else that you will know. So let's open up our web browser because that's typically what we do to start this entire process of retrieving a web page. In fact, the process starts with us, not us as developers, but us as users. We open up our web browser and then we type in a destination to go to. So let's go to tutsplus.com. Now, whenever I hit enter, there are going to be a whole lot of things that occur, but it's going to be so fast for us that we aren't really going to notice it. So I'm going to press enter, and then our browser is going to load the web page at tutsplus.com. Whenever I hit the enter key, the browser and the computer has to find the Tuts Plus website. Now, the domain tutsplus.com is practically meaningless to the computer. That's just for our purposes so that we can go to a website rather easily. A computer communicates on a network by using what's called an IP address. If you have a home network or a network within your business, then every computer on that network has to have an IP address. It's how computers communicate with one another. Well, every server that is hosting a website on the internet has to have a unique IP address, and there has to be some correlation between the domain name and that IP address. And we have a bunch of servers called DNS servers. DNS stands for Domain Name Service. And these servers do nothing more than keep track of domain names and the IP addresses that are linked to those domain names. So whenever I pressed enter, the browser had to find the IP address associated with the tutsplus.com domain name and then send what's called an HTTP request to that IP address. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It is the protocol that is used throughout the entire internet. If you want to go to any web page, you have to use the HTTP protocol. It's just required. We've gotten to a point that we don't specifically say HTTP whenever we are referring to a website because that is automatically supposed to be there. Whenever the internet was very young and everyone wanted to have a web address, everybody said, our web address is http://www.tutsplus.com or whatever other domain name that there was. But that just became so mundane and so common that we just simply say our website is tutsplus.com. But even though that we say that, we are still using the HTTP protocol. Alright, well, back to the web request that the browser sent to the server at the IP address associated with tutsplus.com. On this server is some software called web server software. It's just sitting there waiting for a request to be received. And it receives our request and it tries to fulfill it. Now, our request is simply requesting the web page at tutsplus.com. So the web server is seeing if it can fulfill our request, and then whenever it determines if it can or cannot, it sends a response back to the browser. Now, the contents of this response is determined by if the request can be fulfilled or if it cannot be fulfilled. If it cannot be fulfilled, then all that is sent back is a status code indicating why the server could not fulfill our particular request. But if the server can fulfill it, then it sends back the response that contains a status code saying that everything was okay, and then it also contains the data that we requested. We requested a web page, therefore the data that is sent back from the server is HTML. If we look at the source code of this web page, this is what is sent back with the response. Now, this is just text. There's nothing else that is sent back with the response. All of these images, all of the CSS, all of the JavaScript, unless if the JavaScript and CSS are embedded directly within the HTML, they are not sent with a response. Only the HTML of the request that we made is sent back with a response. So as the browser is loading this HTML, it's finding that it needs more resources that it has to retrieve. These resources can be images or CSS or JavaScript files. So the browser has to make even more requests for those resources so that it can retrieve them and then load them into the page. And then once the browser has completely finished loading all of the resources, we have the final product inside of the browser. And then that is when we as JavaScript developers can have the most fun, because that's when we can start playing around with the document by using JavaScript. We can change practically anything that we want about the web page, but those changes are not permanent because they are only occurring within the browser. They are not saved to the server. So if we were going to make changes to this web page through JavaScript, and then if we requested tutsplus.com again, the server would send back the HTML document that resides on the server. So whatever changes we made would be completely gone. Additionally, the web server will forget us after fulfilling every request. This is because the HTTP protocol is stateless. So we make a request, the server fulfills that request, and then it forgets us. This is another reason why we have server-side applications as part of the whole web application. And that is to maintain state. It not only processes data or accesses data from a database or the file system, it maintains state for us. So whenever you log into a website, it's the server-side application that is written in PHP or ASP.NET or Ruby or some other language. It's that application that's maintaining the state. Without that application, the web server wouldn't know who you are in between different requests for different web pages. So that's just a little bit of background as to what happens whenever you click on a link or type a URL into the browser's location bar and press enter. There's a lot that goes on just to give you a web page that you wanted to view. And as users, thankfully, we don't really have to think about that. But as developers, we do, because sometimes that entire process or portions of that process will impact some decisions that we have to make within our code to either make it more efficient or just to make it work.